No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. This is a special edition of Outspoken, episode number 199, where we are launching our countdown of the 50 worst people in the UK today. Now, you might remember last year, there was a lot of consternation about this, especially from the left. And James O'Brien, Gary Lineker, and Dr. Scholler topped the list. But a lot has changed in 12 months. So all this week, I'm going to be unveiling the brand new 50 with the help of my favourite Outspoken regulars. Now, the only rule, by the way, is that the entrants must be living primarily in the UK today, meaning that well-known expats, Prince Harry and Shamima Begum, miss out. For now, at least, although probably in 12 months they'll both be back here. Today we kick off with number 50 to number 41 with the great Father Calvin Robinson. And while I have your attention, to get the latest breaking news, join a thriving community and communicate with me, please sign up to my Substack, www.outspoken.live. There is a completely free option, and this is the best way to protect me against big tech censorship and ultimately cancellation. You know they want to shut me up really, really badly, especially after the success of Outspoken. So I really do need you to sign up. It only takes 1 minute and it means so much to me. www.outspoken.live. But now, let's go. Straight to the countdown. At number 50, a new entry, the lovey idiot David Tennant. Former Doctor Who star as part of the kind and tolerant left, he says. So kind and so tolerant that he's attacked J.K. Rowling for believing in protecting women's rights and said he wished that Kemi Badenoch, quote, doesn't exist anymore, imploring her to, quote, shut up. But during a torturous and tragically unfunny BAFTA opening act, which has seen him, hallelujah, act as host, we all just wish David Tennant would shut up and act. Father Calvin Robinson, isn't he the worst type of lovey? Be kind, be tolerant, support women's rights. Oh, by the way, unless there's a woman who actually believes in biological reality, she happens to be black, she happens to tick every diversity box, but because she talks against trans madness, Kemi Badenoch should just be disappeared off the face of the earth, according to the scumbag.
Yeah, David Tennant's one of the worst lovies because I think he actually believes what he's saying. He's not one of the ones that's just parroting lines in order to fit in with the rest of the lovies. He goes above and beyond. I remember there was a situation with NHS nurses who were complaining about trans people using their changing rooms. So essentially men using female nurses' changing rooms. And they have a right to complain about that. They should feel insecure and vulnerable in those situations. It's not right, it's not normal, it's not healthy. But he doubled down in saying, and I quote, "It's a tiny bunch of little whinging F word who are on the wrong side of history and they'll soon go away." Like, he wishes anyone that opposes to him to just go away. He said a similar thing about Kemi Badenoch, didn't he? He just wants us to go on. So the whole world is just in line with his line of thinking. That's fascism, essentially. So David Tennant is a fascist.
It's become quite a peculiar thing, hasn't it, Calvin? And in some ways, don't you think it has led to the end of the worship of Hollywood and also the entertainment industry? And I'm sure from your point of view, Calvin, that's probably not a bad thing, because very often it is that industry that tries to pump these really damaging messages into society. For example, the trans ideology. And I think there has been a big wake-up moment. And sure, every now and then, Calvin, we still want to go and see a blockbuster, for example, Wicked, because they didn't completely bastardize and ruin that film. But if we're talking about Snow White and extreme wokery from Disney, no. So actually, in some ways, folk like Tennant, I think, are making people wake up and maybe stop idolizing the entertainment industry in a way that happened when I was covering it.
Absolutely. There's been a lot of research around this that people who idolize celebrities have a lower IQ. And so it's good to move away from that mindset actually and get back towards normality because the celebrities live in a bubble and they're not something to be idolizing at all. We shouldn't idolize anyone, of course. The Christian message is that there's only one true savior, one perfect man, and that's Jesus Christ. And so we should look to him for inspiration. The moment you put someone else on a pedestal, it's just a countdown until that person's going to fall off because no one's perfect. And of course, people will always disappoint us or upset us or say something we don't like. And so why do we do that in the first place? It's not helpful. It's not really healthy. And especially at a time where the liberal lefty lobbies are kind of besmirching our entire civilization and society and talking down anyone that's normal, working class, Christian, conservative, as if these are bad things. So yes, we should ignore them, not put them on pedestals, and just embrace their art. If their art is good, it should speak for itself. You're right. Wicked was actually it was okay. It wasn't as woke as it could be. The actors are awful. And I forget the black woman's name, but she's been peddling a lot of stuff recently.
Erivo. Yeah, but see, what was interesting to me about that, Father Coven, is I saw the movie before I saw any of that press tour, and I was actually really delighted that I did because I was prepared to be absolutely scathing of the movie. If they had destroyed this movie and they had turned it woke, there were a couple of tiny things, but they really were tiny things. And so I was able to switch off from the press tour. What's so funny, though, is I think there is going to be an argument in the years to come that actually the Hollywood studios won't want to put their actors out at all, because actually Rachel Zegler, who played Snow White, what has destroyed the commercial purposes of that film is the things that she has said on her social media. So, for example, she said that she never wanted a Donald Trump voter to find peace. I mean, that is a vile, horrendous thing to say. And I think it's the same thing with David Tennant when he was performing at the BAFTA Awards this year. It's like, I don't want to hear anything from you. Nothing you say is funny because actually you are so clearly a nasty, twisted, horrible human being who doesn't give a damn about the mutilation of young girls. And I can't get over that. I just cannot get over it.
Well, especially David Tennant being Scottish, and Scotland has the worst of this. They were pushing the trans stuff far worse than England has been. And so he should be standing up against it. He should be speaking for young girls up and down his country. Instead, he's doing the government's job. When these lobbyies are on the side of the government that they think they're against, there's something wrong there. It's abysmal that there are boys entering girls' spaces, women being abused in their own personal spaces, whether it's sports, whether it's changing rooms, and even in prisons, they're being exploited. It's disgusting. And the Scottish government's been fully pushing it, and David Tennant has been supporting them all along.
Oh, indeed. A sturgeon lovey. And I guess the whole reason, Father Calvin, that actors have succeeded in the past is because just stick to your script. Okay, that's when you're successful. Read your lines off the script and keep your nasty, vile opinions trying to shut up a political leader because you disagree with her views on the trans issue. Keep that to yourself if you want to have any further career. Okay, let's move on. Number 49, Steve Bray, a new entry for Westminster's Village Idiot. And let me tell you, there is no bigger loser in Britain in need of getting a haircut and getting a real job. For years, the Lib Dem Ramona has taunted politicians and media figures in his embarrassing EU flag hat, blasting his loudspeaker like a spoiled antisocial teenager on a train. In fact, there is much sympathy for Lee Anderson, who is determined to shut down this stain on British society. And I have to say, Father Calvin, spending his life outside on the streets, has certainly weathered Mr. Bray, only 55 years old, and I don't think I'm being unkind by saying he looks decades older than that. And sometimes, you get the face you deserve.
The face you deserve. Steve Bray's not a nice guy. Obviously, he's in the heart of Westminster, so whenever you're walking around there, you're going to see him. Whenever I walk past him, he's always got something nasty to say, and I just laugh it off and continue walking. But it's unpleasant. There's no need for it. Yes, we have different politics. I voted to leave. You voted to remain. So what? Get over it. There used to be a time when people were allowed to have different politics from each other and still be nice people to each other. He epitomizes that Ramona mentality. If I didn't get my own way, therefore I'm going to be petulant for the rest of my life. Now, unless he comes to deal with the consequences of the one of the biggest electoral mandates we've had in our country, he's going to be unhappy for the rest of his life. It's quite sad, actually, and the way he's blasting out his music and got the megaphone to blast out his abuse constantly at anyone that walks past him. It's just, was he never disciplined as a child?
I know, and you have Green Party politicians standing alongside him. The problem with Lee Anderson, I totally agree, by the way, with what Lee Anderson is doing. And I remember we discussed it at the time, Father Calvin, but he almost gives Steve Bray what Steve Bray wants. Although I'm not really in the camp, by the way, of just ignoring people and hope they go away, because they don't.
They don't go away. And you're right, he does. Lee Anderson plays into it, and every time he gives someone like Steve Bray attention, he loves it, he thrives off it. But where do you draw that line? Because you can't constantly ignore people abusing you. You have to react at some point. I think the right to protest is important in our democracy, but do you need a megaphone and do you need that in people's faces while you protest? Probably not. Steve Bray has a big enough gob. He can stand there on the street without the microphone and the big loudspeaker. So perhaps someone could just take his speaker away from him and just leave him to it.
Okay, number 48, Roger Hallam, and this is one heck of a drop, down 34 positions from his place at number 14 on last year's countdown. Why? Well, the Extinction Rebellion founder now languishes behind bars because hapless authorities finally decided that XR's breed of civil disobedience and, in my opinion, eco-terrorism was indeed against the law. So while he had his 5-year prison sentence for disrupting M25 traffic reduced to 4 on appeal, when he is finally released, he'll be entering a new era of activism, with Just Stop Oil announcing an end to law-breaking while spreading their doomsday message of hysteria. And it's interesting, isn't it, Father Calvin, because last year Hallam was at number 14 on the list, and I was imploring the authorities to actually treat this criminal behavior with the seriousness it deserved, because this wasn't protest. This wasn't about free speech, which I'm absolutely committed to.
Oh, yeah.
This was actually about killing people. I mean, that stunt on the M25 could have killed hundreds of people. We know that ambulances were unable to get to hospital. So he's still on the list, but he's behind bars, and actually, I believe, deserves to be.
Roger Hallam is a very, very dangerous man, probably the most dangerous man on this list, actually. I don't know who funds him or where he gets his money, but Roger Hallam is the founder of Extinction Rebellion, Just Stop Oil, Animal Rebellion, Insulate Britain, and also the leader of the political party Burning Pink. This is a man who manipulates vulnerable young activists who want to make a difference in their world. He gets them on board in the same way cult leaders do. We've played videos on your show a long time ago of him telling people, the riots are going to come in and they're going to rape your parents. They're going to shove things up there. It's like, wait, what? The graphic language that he uses against people who are not in line with the climate agenda is actually very, very scary. He is a dangerous, toxic individual who should be in prison, absolutely, because he puts people at risk. He encourages them to be extremists. He's never extremist himself. He encourages these young people to be extremists, the ones who put themselves on top of the motorways and such, and it has them recording themselves crying, because he tells them that the world is dying. Their family are going to be raped and murdered unless they do what he says.
I know. And it is concerning. It is concerning because, unfortunately, what he's doing is brainwashing people. There are threats to this country, Father Calvin. Believe me, we speak about them on a daily basis. But the threat does not come from the climate changing. Trust me. At number 47, a massive, huge slump as well for Humza Yousaf, who is down 29 places from his position last year at number 18 on the list. And the incompetent former First Minister of Scotland deserves that steep drop in influence for being the most useless Scottish politician of his generation, a failure in the health, justice and transport portfolios. And after just 13 months as scheming Sturgeon's successor, he quit to take a full-time career in race baiting and spreading disharmony about the awful white people, who happen to make up 95% of Scotland. Good riddance, I say.
That video will go down in political history, absolutely. Can you imagine if I went to India and said, Indian, you're all Indian. This is not okay. You should be mixed race like me. It's like, it would be seen as quite rude and definitely, certainly racist. And he is. Humza Yousaf is racist. It was good to see him resign in shame, pretty much. I would love to see the devolved parliaments rather be dissolved. I don't think there needs to be an assembly in Wales and a parliament in Scotland. I think they've caused more harm than good. And Humza Yousaf is a prime example of that, as well as scheming Sturgeon.
The thing is, Father Calvin, though, is that quite predictably, he's on a grift now. And he's jumped on the racial disharmony grift train, teaming up with the likes of Mehdi Hassan and Owen Jones. And actually, at the same time as he claims to be spreading tolerance, what I believe he is doing is now purposefully spreading racial disharmony. And Calvin, can he not see the irony? This is a guy who got to become First Minister despite having no talent. And by the way, the Labour opposition leader in Scotland, Anna Sawar, is also non-white. So I find his argument utterly pathetic and intellectually dishonest.
It is dishonest. It's funny, isn't it? You can look at all the major cities around the UK where they have Mohammedan leaders, whether it's metropolitan mayors or whatever. It's kind of like, if this country is racist, if the UK is racist and too white, why are there so many minority people in positions of leadership, including the Mayor of London, probably the third most powerful person in the country? Why is that? How can these people be so successful in such a racist country? Well, the answer, of course, is because the UK isn't racist. In fact, if it is racist, it's a racist against its own people. It's racist against the white native Briton, unfortunately. If you're white, heterosexual and Christian and conservative in the UK, you're going to have a hard time. But if you're brown, Mohammedan and liberal, the world is your oyster. It really is. And this is why these people with actually no talent, no skills, and pretty much no knowledge can get so far, because they play the race card. They use diversity, inclusion, and equity against the system in favor of themselves. And they get a leg up, they get a promotion, they get a boost. And it's unfair. Actually, they have privilege. It's brown privilege.
Let's continue our countdown of the 50 worst people in the UK today. At number 46 on the list, taking a massive stumble down 22 places from number 44, Marina Purkiss, the nauseating left-wing commentator. And I think Carol Vorderman, without any discernible brain power, has slumped so far because she proves that an incompetent Labour administration is not good news for the haters and wreckers. Purkiss, remember, is the host of a god-awful global podcast with a shopping TV presenter and failed on the graveyard shift on LBC. She was recently humiliated on the station when she tried to degrade Britain's wonderful farmers. So she is increasingly irrelevant, Father Calvin, but I think what's interesting is hard left figures like Purkiss are just struggling to cope in this new world where, let's be honest, all of the incompetence is coming from Labour, and she absolutely promised her audience that we were going to be entering some sort of peace and harmony, the promised land, Father Calvin.
Yeah. I mean, in her own words, she almost cried when Ed Miliband was given Minister of Climate Crisis.
I cried. I cried for
that's
very
how
different
absurd it is.
reasons.
Right. But I don't think she's publicly apologized for attacking you on false accusations.
No,
I remember the Mirror had to.
No, she didn't. And she is actually a despicable human being. And I don't say that lightly. You know, there are other people, Father Calvin, in this space. I don't know, who would I say? Someone like Pippa Carrera, the political editor of The Guardian, who I completely disagree with politically, but I would never describe her as a despicable human being. But Marina Purkiss is. She is nasty. She will spread lies and what the left call disinformation to try and bring down her enemies. And I find it sickening, actually, that she remains a fixture in that space. But as I say, I think the space is becoming so much more fringe-like, Father Calvin, because if you are a left-wing journalist or commentator and you are still deciding to talk about Boris Johnson or Nigel Farage rather than the actual corruption that is actually happening right now at number 10 Downing Street, you're like a dishonest actor, right? Like, how can anyone take you seriously about anything again?
They were attacking the Conservative government consistently while the Conservative government were in power. And they were saying, yeah, we're punching up. But now the Labour government are in power. They no longer want to punch up. Funny that, isn't it? And they continue attacking the same people. So now they're punching down by their own measure. And instead of just being honest and saying, these people like Marina Purkiss and Carol Vorderman, they're not journalists. They are hard left activists. If they were open and transparent about it, people won't be as bothered. But it's the fact that they cover it up and they lie. It's the hypocrisy of it all that always gets people riled up. Marina Purkiss in particular is not a very nice person. I've seen the way she treated you and attacks you. And I've seen the way she treats other people and attacks when she doesn't like them. She doesn't like their politics. It's not a good faith engagement. It never is with her.
No, see, I remember when she came in to GB News, which I found particularly shocking, by the way, that GB News would want her in. That's the first thing. But she wants the money, right? So she'll actually do anything for money. Marina Purkiss. You might as well just call her the political version of Bonnie Blue, because if the price is high enough, Calvin, all of the morals go out the window, right? Because let me tell you, you could not pay me enough money to go and sit down with Byline Times. Never, ever, ever. But political version of Bonnie Blue, Marina Purkiss, strutted into the GB News studio as if she owned the place, treated the staff behind the scenes, Calvin, like a piece of dirt on her shoe. And doesn't that actually show you the true person? Because actually, as you've pointed out, Calvin, lots of times, many of the staff working at GB News are not politically aligned with the channel at all, right? They're just young, aspiring TV producers trying to make a buck.
So they would have probably aligned with her views if she'd have given them the time of day to find out. But it's funny, you can always tell whether a person is a good person or not by how they treat people who are under them on the ladder, really and truly. Because that's never a station people stay in. People are always moving upwards or down. And so the people that you see to be underneath you, the way you treat them, that shows you everything you need to know about your character. And for people like her to swan in and just walk all over these people just shows that she's not a nice person, not someone that you want to work with. Now, there are lefties that I'm happy to work with. You know, I had to work with a lot of them when I was at GB News, and mostly on your panel.
Yeah.
Some of
them are decent human beings, actually, like Amy Nicole Turner. There are some, not many. I'm desperately racking my brain. Oh, who else was decent? Oh, Matthew Laza. He's a decent guy. Do you remember him? He was the former Labour advisor. He worked for Ed Miliband. Gloria Di Piero,
you know what?
Former Labour MP, incredibly decent woman, and she was so supportive of me during everything, Father Calvin.
Well, I actually really got on with Aaron Bastani. I really enjoyed having him.
He's a decent guy, but Novara Media is just
massive communist,
so terrible.
Massively wrong, but decent, yeah. And all his employees seem to be very toxic, so I don't know what that is about. But there's something about the leftist ideology that it cuts off their empathy And so they're not able to see the world from a different perspective. They're not able to understand our point of view, for example. And that makes them hate us. And that's quite sad, because I don't think we hate the left. I think we see them as wrong. They genuinely hate us and don't want us to exist.
You're completely right. That is the huge difference, which is why it's so ironic when many of them have on their X profiles, Calvin, like hashtag be kind. And then you'll read down, a couple of tweets and they're calling Liz Truss a despicable human being who should never show her face in public again. I mean, and that is Marina Purkiss, right? She is a professional troll and the Bonnie Blue of left-wing politics, because she will do anything if the money is high enough. Sticking with the left-wing media, Father Calvin, at number 45 on our list, Krishnan Guru-Murthy, a new entry for the hard left Channel 4 news host. He is, of course, a fame-hungry former Strictly Come Dancing contestant, but more importantly, in the context of this countdown, an activist masquerading as a journalist, who I think will finally bring the curtain down on the irresponsibly biased Channel 4 news, which sees its ratings at 7 p.m. plummet by the month, by the day. Remember, Calvin, this man was suspended for just a week for calling then Conservative Minister Steve Baker the C word, yet Channel 4 still believes it's appropriate for him to host election night coverage, which he did so, by the way, alongside Emily Maitlis this year, mourning as Donald Trump won the US presidency. For me, Father Calvin, it is just an outrage that Channel 4 continues to claim it runs an impartial news service, given they have a guy like Krishnan Guru-Murthy hosting the show.
Just to see those pictures you just had on screen, it's awful, that election night coverage with all of those liberals, no balance whatsoever. Channel 4 is actually the worst channel. I refuse to work with them. One time I did a documentary with them, and they clipped my answers from questions and put them on other questions in order to paint their own narrative. I'm like, this is fraud. Never mind libel, but yeah, awful outlet. But so I'm not surprised they employ someone like Krishnan Guru-Murthy, who again is someone who plays the race card, says things like the war on woke is actually racism. It's like, no, there's a war on woke because we don't think woke is good, especially for young people. Telling them that they can change gender, or that they should be aborting their children, or that actually everything is racist and all black people are oppressed and all white people are oppressed. All this stuff is horrible. So that there is a war on woke, but he's like, no, it's actually just about racism. And he's one of these people that plays that card in order to get success. And what also gets me is these hard left extremists that we keep mentioning, they're all grifters. David Tennant, Marina Purkiss, Krishnan Guru-Murthy, they're all there to make a buck. And people like us are the ones that they call grifters. Do you know how many reality TV things I've turned down, including Big Brother? And this guy is one who takes every single opportunity to get his face out there. Any chance to make some money and get his face out there. Wants fame, wants fortune. They're grifters.
I totally agree, Father Calvin. I mean, I've turned down Strictly Come Dancing. I've turned down Celebrity Big Brother. Obviously, none of those offers would come to me today because I now live in this brilliant, independent, cancelled space. But even when I was in the mainstream media, Calvin, no interest in doing any of that. This isn't about the fame or the money for me. It's about saving the country. And actually, I listened. If you haven't listened, Father Calvin, it really is worth going back, and I recommend everyone does so, to this great interview that Megyn Kelly did with the New York Times. She's obviously a good friend of both of us, Father Calvin, isn't she? And she's been incredibly supportive of us through all of our travails. Actually, just like you, she was the other person who quit GB News. The moment that GB News turned on me over that incident with Lawrence Fox. But she did this fascinating interview with the New York Times where she was just trying to get through to the New York Times on this podcast, the interview, that the type of media ecosystem that used to exist, that the New York Times celebrates, is over. And yet, Calvin, they are so obsessed with their own little circle, they just cannot understand that actually it is completely possible for Megyn Kelly to endorse Donald Trump and admit that she voted for Donald Trump while still being an effective journalist who at times, where necessary, will hold the administration to account. And Megyn was making the point, Calvin, do you not understand that is what the left-wing media have done for decades. The only difference was they hid behind this very, very thin veneer of impartiality. And I feel like Krishnan Guru-Murthy does that. It's like, we know exactly what you think. We know who you voted for, but actually you don't have the balls to come out and say it and be honest and be authentic with us. And I think it is that lack of authenticity, actually, which is why people will end up turning off the mainstream media. Because, I'm sorry, you only have to watch about 30 seconds of Channel 4 News, which, by the way, I don't watch. You know, Father Calvin, I do watch quite a lot of mainstream media for work, because I think it's important for me to show, to call out, you know, the British Bashing Corporation, woke ITV, Sly News. But Channel 4 News is now such an irrelevance, I don't even put myself through it.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there in that people appreciate transparency and honesty. And so when I come on, I could say, yeah, I'm voting for UKIP, and you can say I'm supporting reform because I think they have the best chance of breaking the uniparty system. So people know exactly where you stand, and they know exactly where I stand. And Krishnan Guru-Murthy and people like that come on and say, oh, we're politically neutral. It's like the people that come out and say, you know, I'm above two-party politics. You always know they're the liberals. The Conservatives generally are quite honest and open about where they stand. The liberals lie in order to pretend they're superior to the rest of us. But the moment they leave the BBC or Channel 4, like Emily Maitlis, then you get to know that actually they voted Labour all along, right? And we knew that.
Yeah, no, indeed. And from my perspective as well, by the way, you can actually do that even working within the off-communist system. Like, I never denied where I stood politically, but I'm absolutely independent because I'm not a member of any of these parties. I don't shill for any of these parties, but I want to be honest with you at home about who I voted for so that you understand where my biases might lie. And I think that's why it's so much better that Meghan was totally honest and said, yep, I've had all of these issues with Trump in the past. The reason I voted for him this time is because he is the only person that is going to protect women's rights. Of course, there were loads of other issues too. And for example, I'm just thinking about my personal experience with this. Yes, I did support Boris Johnson because I was absolutely determined that Brexit needed to happen, even though, let's be honest, he didn't finish the job, and that was disappointing. But remember, Theresa May was actually going to take us back in. So sometimes you've got to deal with political reality, right, and political expediency. But the moment Boris Johnson unnecessarily locked us down, you know, Father Calvin, because you were with me at Talk Radio, I would call him out every day. And sure, it means that you end up on the banned list. You don't get the interviews. Megyn Kelly was talking about the fact that Donald Trump ignored her for 6 months after her last interview with him. Probably Nigel Farage is ignoring me a little bit at the moment. But I'm sorry, I will not shill for any person or any party, but I will be honest about where I stand when there is an election to come.
It's about having integrity, isn't it? I'm exactly the same as you on that. I was on Team Boris. I was like, this guy needs to get in. We've got to get Brexit done. And then he becomes illiberal in his ways of handling COVID. I'm like, okay, this is not good. And we called him out live on air, as we should. But they don't like to do that because they're tribal. For them, it's like left versus right. It's not right versus wrong. And so they'll always back the Labour Party. They'll always challenge and go against the Conservative Party because that's what they see as their job. And of course, it's not their job. Krishnan Guru-Murthy and all these people, what they should be doing is challenging anyone in authority who is in any position of power over us, any representative, any elected official, because that's the job of the media.
I just want all of these people, Father Calvin, to have to stand on their own 2 feet, or the organizations to stand on their own 2 feet. The democratization of news, I think, is going to be incredibly important in terms of saving the United Kingdom. And as we know, it desperately needs saving. Right now, the British Bashing Corporation, Channel 4 News, they all have this almost like bureaucratic advantage because of historic infrastructure, which has given them the platform. But it is changing. I mean, more people watch Outspoken, Father Calvin. I find it fascinating. Actually, quite a lot more in terms of watching the live show on their TV set than on their mobile phone. And I don't necessarily think that's something I would have expected when I first launched last July. But I'm delighted about it, because what it means is that people still want that experience of potentially watching the show on the big screen in their living room, but they're no longer just going to automatically go to Channel 1 or Channel 3 or Channel 4. Now, at that point, that's when there will be a reckoning for people like Krishnan Guru-Murthy, because no one wants to watch his podcast, right? No one's watching Channel 4 news content or Channel 4 content on YouTube. The only audience advantage they have is because of the infrastructure that they have been provided by the government. And by the way, shame on the Conservative government for promising for over a decade that they would sell Channel 4 and then bottling it every single time. Shame on them for that.
Yeah, shame on them for not defunding the BBC as well. And you're absolutely right that people are tied into these systems. That pretty much the TV tax, or as they like to call it, the license fee.
It's a poll tax, isn't it? Let's be honest, it's a poll tax.
You pay a state propagandist in order to watch anything else. It's absurd. But the fact that you're right, BBC One, BBC Two, ITV, and Channel 4 are all there by default on our telly boxes means that people are kind of hooked in from the beginning. But there's a generational shift, and I think from the baby boomers onwards, people are finding optional things to tune into now. You're absolutely right. People are watching your YouTube show and your Substack on their television, and people are finding content for themselves. And so going forward, these old-fashioned legacy media infrastructures are going to die out, and that's going to be a good thing for consumer choice.
The countdown of the 50 worst people in the UK continues. At number 44, LBC's demonic hypocrite, Shelagh Fogarty, a new entry. But this woman has been key to, as I call it, the Labour broadcasting companies lurch to the left, because her hiring in the afternoon slot against the wishes of loyal listeners solidified power around that awful, awful man. You know who I'm talking about. And this year, it emerged here on Outspoken that James O'Brien had teamed up with Shelagh Fogarty to sabotage Katie Hopkins' hit weekend show on the station. Yet what stuns me is that now there is a Labour administration in power, Fogarty fails to hold them to account on a daily basis. And Father Calvin Robinson, it was absolutely disturbing, actually, hearing from Katie Hopkins exactly the lengths that Shelagh Fogarty and James O'Brien went to sabotage her show. She would be presenting on I think it was a Saturday or a Sunday morning, Katie Hopkins, and she told the Getting There podcast that O'Brien and Fogarty coordinated with the LBC staff, who would have been very lefty, to actually pull out the technology in the studio so that Katie was unable to receive calls for her show. And they hated Hopkins, didn't they? Because she was the top-rated presenter on LBC. And they hated Nigel Farage too, because after Katie Hopkins' defenestration, he was the top-rated person on LBC. So unfortunately, the LBC management gave in to this very unholy alliance of James O'Brien and Shelagh Fogarty. And genuinely, they have destroyed that station now, Father Calvin. I will not listen. I will not listen. Obviously, if they've done a political interview that is in the news, I will look at that. But even Nick Ferrari is now very much on the left. And people think I'm crazy for saying that, but he is, because he understands that if you're not on the left at LBC, you're out. I mean, Ian Dale is now so far on the list, I find it extraordinary that he can describe himself as a conservative, either big C or small C.
That is funny. Pretty much every single presenter on LBC is left-wing. It's painful to listen to. I never choose to listen to it, but if I'm in the UK and I get a cab, you can be sure that they're going to have LBC on, and it's hard to stomach because it is so far left. I'm not the biggest fan of Nigel Farage, but he was fantastic on LBC. He was such a good broadcaster. That was probably his peak, to be honest. That was his strength. And likewise, Katie Hopkins, outstanding. I think she's wonderful, but she was great on there. And so it balanced it out because they have all these hard left trolls who are just like, just James O'Brien is so miserable. I don't know how people can stomach it for too long. But then you had people like Katie or Nigel that actually provided a different perspective. And that's what people want. They want to hear a different perspective. And actually, most people in the UK are small c conservative and are in line with people like Katie and Nigel. So it made sense. Of course, they were the biggest hitters. Of course, they had the highest ratings. And of course, the lefty liberals wanted to get rid of them, but they always get their way, don't they? They have these big bandwagons, like what Carol Vorderman did with your show, with the petition, or they operate behind the scenes, being snide, like what they've done against Katie Hopkins and the technology. It's how the left operate. It's not a nice place. They're not nice people most of the time. And Sheila Fogarty is an example of that. Very hostile, very nasty on her show. Everything's the fault of the white man for some reason. I think she forgets what color she is. There's a weird self-hatred going on there. And again, I don't know how people can listen to it for too long because it's just negative non-stop.
I could never listen to it. Honestly, I would not listen to a second of it. I absolutely would not. I guess in some ways, maybe the fact that LBC is just loud and proud now, though, as a hard left network is a good thing because I think it hastens their demise, which speeds up this independent media revolution. I know I talk about it a lot, Father Calvin, but it's not about me. It's about the fact that actually the only way to save this country in a similar way that the United States has been saved is for there to be a genuine revolution, which means no longer having the gatekeepers of a station like LBC. Because what is quite interesting about LBC, Father Calvin, is they will turn on their own if they stray too far in another direction. So we've seen both Carol Vorderman and Sangeeta Miska axed from the station this year because they were a little too left-wing. So it's very much like GB News, isn't it, on the right? It's okay as long as you fit into a very safe Overton window that advertisers are going to accept. But if you stray outside of that, you're out.
It's almost like a cult, isn't it?
Yeah.
Once you become no longer acceptable, you're kind of cast out.
Yes, because James O'Brien was utterly ruthless about Sangeeta Miska, like basically going on a big tirade on his show. Oh, no. It was nothing to do with the fact that she's anti-Israel. It was all to do with the fact her ratings were rubbish. And you saw exactly the same thing happen from the presenters at GB News, who all turned on you and me and Lawrence Fox, rather than actually think we need solidarity here, because sure, I might not agree with Father Calvin on everything, but if we don't support his right to free speech, what about when I happen to step over the line?
It's short-termism. Before I got fired, I spoke to a load of people at GB News to support you. I was like, look, this is important because if we don't support Dan, the rest of us are next. This is how it works. And they were all like, yeah, of course, we've got to support him, we've got to support him. And I step forward and support you and look behind me, all the others are gone. so my head gets chopped off, but none of theirs do. Because at the end of the day, they're selfish and careerist and put their ambitions first. And that means, of course,
it's why Michelle Dewberry, right, never speaks about the vaccine on air, doesn't speak about Tommy Robinson on air, because she hides those views from the public because she knows that it makes her unacceptable with the management. Now,
so people who watch Dubes and Kerr aren't going to get the full story because she's not able to give it you anymore because she's protecting her own back. And so people who protect their own back to that degree, what's the point of their content if it's not going to be truthful and open and honest?
Yeah, no, totally. And I do find it interesting because, obviously we would have those discussions that no one else did. Even the Enoch Powell discussion, Father Calvin, that everyone else on the channel ran from when you tweeted, I think, was it that you said he was right? Or it was something like that. It's a couple of years ago now. But, we had the conversation because surely having the conversation is what it's about. But let's move on now to number 43. a new entry for the British-hating lefty Yasmin Alibhai-Brown. Now, this Uganda-born columnist was able to establish a successful and lucrative media career in Britain after attending Oxford University in 1975, which to me makes it even more upsetting that she now spends every waking moment on the mainstream media, and trust me, she's always on the mainstream media, deriding the United Kingdom, deriding Brits as racist and this country as being some type of racist hellhole. She's also deeply unpleasant about anyone who happened to vote for breakfast, and I believe she is a malign influence on British society. And the Yasmin Alibhai-Brown thing fascinates me, Father Calvin, because you would think, as someone who fled a regime and a war in Uganda, she would be absolutely amazed at the opportunities that this country gave her. And surely, if this country is as racist as she claims it is, she would never have had those opportunities.
Absolutely. Once again, if you don't like the place that you're living, live somewhere else. If the United Kingdom is so racist and bad for brown people, why is there so many brown people in the UK standing there saying how racist and bad it is? It makes no sense to me. Yasmin is a prime example of this. She's such a nasty piece of work. I remember she slandered Lawrence live on air, and he made her apologize. But even her apology was mealy mouthed. Like, she couldn't bring herself to say it with her full chest. And she's a prime example of one of these grifters that will use the race card to get. She's on Jeremy Vine every blooming week, for goodness sake, and all she does is besmirch white people. I don't know why the lefty legacy media love to have a brown person on who will say how bad white people are. It's like this self-flagellation. It is. The United Kingdom is one of the most diverse countries in the world. It's one of the most inclusive countries in the world. It's one of the most equitable countries in the world. So the DEI lobby should be right at home, yet they're not. They can't. They somehow can never be happy. And again, there are other places to live. Speaking as someone who was not happy in the UK and moved out of the UK, there are other places you can go and live, right?
Exactly. Feel free. And I don't say this horribly, but she could, of course, always go back to Uganda. Right. I don't want that to happen. But
I do. Just literally, the UK is a great place. I love my country, despite having many issues with the way it's going at the moment. I love my country. And so people that hate it, I don't want them to be there because they make it worse. Yasmin Alibhai-Brown is one of those people. Just go back to Uganda. If you'll be better off there, if you'll be happy there, please just go back there.
Yes, but of course she knows she wouldn't be better off. Hence why she will never go back. And actually, Yasmin Alibhai-Brown should be one of the success stories of immigration to the UK, yet it's never enough. It's never enough, Calvin. She doesn't want us to be able to celebrate Easter. And the problem is we cannot allow that sort of malign influence to continue. But look, the countdown continues. Stand by, Father Calvin. Back with you in just 1 minute. But first, the reason you're watching this show is that it's becoming increasingly difficult to trust the mainstream media or so-called fact-checkers who claim to determine which facts are true. And there's good reason for that, given the debate over free speech, the controversy surrounding Brexit, and how Trump and other politicians challenging the status quo are portrayed. But I have the solution. It's called Ground News, and it's the best way to stay informed and cut through media bias and narrative so you can get the facts for yourself. Go to ground.news/outspoken to check it out. But I want to show you this incredible website and app. Actually, it's a brilliant app. I've got it on my phone in action. So let's look at that speech earlier in the year from the US Vice President J.D. Vance, the Munich Security Conference. He tore into the European government. He tore into the UK. This is before the Oval Office meeting, but all about the despicable retraction of free speech. So what Ground News does is immediately collate the 361 sources covering the story into one place, and then its biased distribution service shows how the story is being covered by the media, but broken down by whether the outlets lean to the left or the right. You can then see every article about the topic broken down by the political position and ownership of the publication. So not surprisingly, Newsmax, GB News gave fair and accurate coverage in this case. The Huff Post and The Independent did not. What's more is that Ground News gets to know you personally, providing you with news stories you're interested in while also analysing your own biases. So my favourite feature is the blind spot feed. What it does is surface upwards of 20 stories every day that you might not be hearing about because of the corruption of the mainstream media. Look, I know the reason you're watching Outspoken is because you love the news, you're interested in the news, you know how important the news is, but you don't trust the legacy media to deliver it for you. So what Ground News does is give you the tools to understand the truth about what is going on. I can say it's the only way I read the news now because it allows me to see through media bias and manipulative narratives. Go to ground.news/outspoken to check it out. You can subscribe through my link for 40% off the Vantage plan, which is what I use for unlimited access. Couple of quick notes too. Ground News subscriber funded, and supporting my sponsors also supports my work. So for less than a Netflix subscription, you can get all the world's news in one place and think for yourself. It really is a game changer if you're a news junkie like me, which I reckon you are. So that's ground.news/outspoken. But now back to the show. Dropping 3 positions on our list of the 50 worst people in the UK today. At number 42, the always hacked off actor Hugh Grant. The now legendary Miserable Victim act from Hugh took another twist over the past year after, surprise, surprise, he settled his legal case against Rupert Murdoch's British newspaper, even though he still tried to take the moral high ground. And his ongoing support of Prince Harry while attempting to limit freedom of the press because he never got over the indignity of being caught with his pants down with the prostitute Divine Brown makes him one of the most unpleasant actors in the country, which really is saying something. And the reason he's dropped just a little bit in the list this year, Father Calvin Robinson, is because this guy doesn't mean what he says. He folded, he took the money, Prince Harry folded, and they took the money. They weren't prepared to put it all on the line. What they did was waste a huge amount of time over many, many years. But at the end of the day, Hugh bottled it. The guy is all talk, and it's boring talk. It's like really lame talk. It's also, by the way, talk that is so outdated, Father Calvin, because it's like the whole world has moved on. Newspapers don't set the agenda anymore in a way like they used to.
Yeah, that's part of the issue, isn't it? They operate in the old world where we have entirely moved on. X is the platform for news now, and they're still living in a newspaper world. Nobody subscribes to newspapers anymore. No one has them delivered. The only places they go these days are TV studios and airports. And so he's living in the past. But they always say, oh, we're in this for the long haul. We want justice. And actually what they want is a settlement because they're in it for the cash, if they were if they were entirely honest. But I remember he was a pain in the backside over Brexit, Hugh Grant, the guy who only ever plays himself. So he's not traditionally a good actor either.
Exactly. He's just Hugh Grant. I mean, it literally doesn't matter what movie he's in. He's Hugh Grant. He's just a slightly nicer version of Hugh Grant, though, Father Calvin, because Hugh Grant in real life is genuinely really unhappy and really miserable, as a lot of celebrities are.
Right. He's a slightly more good-looking Boris Johnson is what he plays in every single movie. But yeah, he was trying to tell us all how to vote in the referendum, and that really stuck out to me because these celebrities, these actors, like, again, just create your art. This is why we follow you, for your art. We don't want politics from you. We don't want you to tell us how to vote and how to live our lives. It's a weird situation we have going on these days. We never used to have that. But he was one of the ones that got quite nasty about the referendum, because I don't know what benefits these actors get from the European Union. I know there are some financial benefits, but a lot of them were upset about potentially losing those, and Hugh Grant was one of them.
Oh, yeah. Of course he was. I mean, at the end of the day, this is just because they can afford, Father Calvin, to sign up the globalist playbook, and it's never going to impact them. And
didn't he say recently that London's gone down the pan? That's something I can agree with him on, though.
He did. It was
If even
it was interesting actually, but then immediately backed away from it because it was like, oh no, I can't be seen to be attacking Sadiq Khan.
again the tribalism of the left, like I'm living in a S-hole, it's awful, I hate it, but I have to say I love it because it's diverse, right? And we've got a
Yeah.
Mohammedan mayor, so it must be a good thing.
Because remember, that's
Even
what got John Cleese sort of partly cancelled by the left in the first place when he spoke about England, but I think specifically London being unrecognisable. And I found it
it
really
is.
interesting that Hugh Grant posted that, but then immediately ran away from the fact that he was making a political statement. It's like, who do you think has destroyed London? You idiot. London was
You know,
thriving in 2012 when Boris Johnson was the mayor. Whatever you think of Boris Johnson as a prime minister, as a London mayor, he did a fabulous job. London was thriving. London is now coming close to being a third world hellhole, actually, in so many ways. And yet Hugh Grant thinks he can comment on that without making it political. No, it's completely political. The reason it's like that is Sadiq Khan, but the left feel like they have to support him because of his unique characteristics, which is the fact he is a Muslim.
knife crimes at an all-time high. In fact, all crime is at an all-time high. Burglaries go unresponded. The police don't investigate crime anymore. In fact, they're too busy knocking on your doors to ask you about social media posts.
Yes.
Or dealing with Lawrence Fox. It's absolutely ridiculous that we don't have bobbies on the beat anymore to address what is rising is gang crime and petty crime. And I mean, when you travel around a bit, you get to see, because when you're in it, you don't recognize the change and how rapid it is. But when you come out and go back in, you see how bad it really is. And London is awful right now. On my last trip to London, I remember thinking how much it smelled, how dirty it was, and how I could walk around for an hour or two and not even hear a single English spoken word, never mind English accent. It's been taken over by the third world, unfortunately.
Yeah,
And I
it's
feel so
completely
sorry for
unsafe.
people that still live in
It's completely
London.
unsafe as well. And, you know, the Met Police think, oh, you know, that aspiring terrorist, that Pakistani Muslim rape gang, that murderer, that rapist, far, far too difficult. We're just going to put that in the too hard basket because Lawrence Fox has just sent a tweet. And that means we can assign 8 police officers to his house, get lots of attention. The left are going to love us. It is a joke. At number 41, our first Labour minister on the list. I reckon, Father Calvin, she probably won't be the last. Shabana Mahmood, a new entry for the incompetent Justice Secretary. Two-tier Keir Starmer was always going to need a minister prepared to defend the indefensible. Step forward Mahmood, whose first year in the job has resulted in violent criminals being released early to offend again, and the introduction of state-sanctioned discrimination when determining sentences. She is a total disgrace.
The Lord High Chancellor Mahmood. What happened to Great Britain? Mahmood is now the Lord High Chancellor. Honestly, it's like a takeover happening right under our noses. The UK is rushing to become an Islamic caliphate. Just this morning, I was tweeting about one of these recruitment videos that the British Army put out, where the soldiers stop what they're doing, stop traversing the climate, and stop fighting this war to pause for a minute, so Mohammedan can get down on his rug and put his bum in the air and pray for a bit. It's like it's absolutely insane. This is the message we're sending out to the world, that actually we're not very good at doing anything anymore other than promoting Islam. Just last week we had our king come out and say the Quran says, you know, Ramadan Mubarak or whatever, peace be upon you. It's like the Supreme Governor of the Church of England, the defender of the faith, is promoting Islam. And everywhere we look, we've got Lord Mayor of London, Mohammedan, Mayor of Birmingham, Leicester, all the major cities, all the key personnel are Mohammedans. And now the Lord High Chancellor of the country is a Mohammedan. And people are like, oh, yeah, isn't that lovely? It's diverse, it's inclusive, it's equitable. In a Christian country, I would expect to be governed by Christian morality and Christian ethics and Christian values, not Mohammedan ethics or values, which I think are actually contradictory to Christian values and to the British values. And people can talk about multiculturalism and diversity all day, every day if they want, but you wouldn't go to a Mohammedan country and expect to be treated by Christian values. You know, anyone that travels the world, a woman goes to Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates, she's going to cover her arms and her shoulders because she knows that their set of values are different to ours. But people who come to Great Britain, for some reason, they don't take on board our values. They take over, and in fact, they don't take over. We give our country away. And Shabana Mahmood is a prime example of that.
Father Calvin Robinson, so great to have you on this Outspoken special. There is the start of the list. So just a little recap of the 50 worst people in the UK today. At number 50, David Tennant. Number 49, Steve Bray. Number 48, Roger Hallam. 47, Humza Useless. 46, Marina Purkiss. 45, Krishnan Guru-Murthy. 44, Shelagh Fogarty. 43, Yasmin Alibhai-Brown. 42, Hugh Grant. 41, Shabana Mahmood. And the countdown continues tomorrow with Alex Phillips. But Father Calvin, thank you so much for being here for this Outspoken special. Remember, no uncancelled after show this week, because as you might know, I am with Father Calvin Robinson on the Mark Stein cruise. But don't worry, the after show returns live on Monday. So to watch from them, please do sign up at www.outspoken.live. The Outspoken Substack is a way to get the latest breaking news, join a thriving community, and communicate with me direct. There is a completely free option, and this is the best way to protect me against big tech censorship and ultimately cancellation. You know they want to shut me up, so I really do need you to sign up. It will only take a minute. It means the world to me. That's www.outspoken.live. But the countdown of the 50 worst people in the UK today continues tomorrow at 5 p.m. UK time, midday Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific with the great Alex Phillips. Do hit subscribe right now on YouTube and Rumble. And most importantly, I promise to keep fighting for you.